I've watched enough families over the years to know that love doesn't always look the way we expect. Some people protect the ones they care about by staying close. Others do it by keeping their distance and never once explaining why. I heard a story once that proved this to me. It began with a letter that should never have arrived. The envelope sat on her kitchen counter for 3 hours before she touched it. She'd noticed it immediately, her name written in unfamiliar handwriting, a return address from a town she'd never heard of. And beneath both, a name that made her hands go still. Eleanor Marsh, her grandmother, the woman who, according to every social worker and foster parent she'd ever known, wanted nothing to do with her. She picked it up slowly. Inside legal letterhead, a single paragraph. We regret to inform you of the passing of Eleanor Marsh. Per her final wishes, you have been named sole beneficiary of her estate, including the property located at... She stopped reading. Sole beneficiary, her. The granddaughter Eleanor had supposedly turned away 21 years ago. The bus dropped her at the edge of town just after noon, population 2,400. According to the faded sign near the gas station, one diner, one hardware store, a post office that looked older than anything she'd ever seen. She found the lawyer's office above a feed supply shop, wooden stairs that groaned under each step. The door at the top had gold lettering, half-peeled Boyd and Associates. Inside, a man in his 70s sat behind a desk, buried in paper. White hair, wire-rimmed glasses pushed up on his forehead. He studied her face for a long moment before speaking. You look like her. She didn't know what to say to that. He stood slowly, pulled open a drawer, and slid a set of keys across the desk, then a sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges. Eleanor left instructions, he said. This one. He tapped the envelope. Only when you're ready, not before. Ready for what? He didn't answer, just handed her a hand-drawn map. The ink faded but legible. Take the main road east. 10 minutes. You'll see the mailbox. She turned to leave. One more thing. His voice stopped her at the door. People will come around, asking questions, offering to buy. He paused. Don't rush into anything. The farmhouse sat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by oak trees shedding their October leaves. Her first thought abandoned. Her second, no, not quite. The porch sagged on one side. Paint curled away from the shutters. But the grass had been mowed recently. The gutters were clear. Behind the house stood a large barn, wooden doors, heavy iron lock. She walked toward it, tried to peer through the gap between the planks. Nothing but darkness. The front door key fit. She pushed it open. Dust hung in the air. The smell of old wood and something faint lavender. Maybe a kitchen with dishes still in the drying rack. A living room stacked with books. And by the window, a chair, worn fabric, a folded blanket draped across the armrest. She stepped closer. The cushions still held the shape of someone who had sat there for years. The armrests, smoothed by hands gripping the same spots over and over. The chair faced the road, the only road leading in. On the windowsill behind the curtain, a photograph, lying face down. She reached for it. The photograph showed a woman in her 30s. Dark hair pulled back, strong hands resting on the frame of the barn door. Behind her, machinery she couldn't identify. She turned it over. Faded ink on the back, E. M. 1987, the year everything changed. Her grandmother, young, capable, and clearly not just a farmer. She set the photograph on the windowsill, face up this time. Then she went looking. The kitchen held more than dishes. Behind a door she'd assumed led to a pantry. She found a small workroom, bench, tools arranged with precision wrenches, a soldering iron, measuring instruments she didn't recognize, rolled blueprints stacked in a wooden crate, technical drawings pinned to a corkboard, covered in calculations and handwritten notes. This wasn't hobby work. This was something else entirely. She unrolled one of the blueprints. Diagrams of pipes, filtration systems, chemical notations in the margins. The title block read Soil Remediation System, Prototype 4. Her grandmother had been an inventor. A drawer beneath the workbench. She pulled it open. Letters, dozens of them, all from the same sender, Hale Industrial. She skimmed the first few. Requests for licensing agreements, offers to purchase patents, each letter more insistent than the last. And at the bottom of the stack, her grandmother's responses, carbon copies typed on an old machine. Thank you for your interest. The answer remains, no. I will not be selling. Please do not contact me again. This is my final response. The last letter, handwritten in the margin, never. She was still holding it when she heard the car. Black SUV, new, expensive. It rolled up the dirt road and stopped in front of the porch like it belonged there. The man who stepped out wore pressed khakis and a blue Oxford shirt, silver hair combed back, smile already in place before his feet touched the ground. You must be the granddaughter. He walked toward her with one hand extended, the other holding a foil-covered dish. Victor Hale, I was a friend of Eleanor's. Thought I'd welcome you to town. His handshake was firm. His eyes moved past her to the house, then the barn, then back. Brought some of my wife's chicken casserole. Eleanor always loved it. She took the dish, said nothing. Must be overwhelming. He stepped onto the porch without being invited, leaned against the rail like he'd done it 100 times. Inheriting all this, a young woman on her own, probably not what you had planned. I didn't have plans. Everyone has plans. His voice stayed warm. Easy. The question is whether this place fits into them. She set the dish on the porch rail beside him. Did you know my grandmother well? Oh, we went way back. Business associates. You might say, before she decided to go it alone, something flickered in his expression. Gone before she could name it. Stubborn woman. Brilliant. But stubborn. What kind of business? Agricultural technology? Soil treatment? Water systems? He straightened. Hands in his pockets. Eleanor had ideas ahead of her time. Unfortunately, ideas don't always pay the bills. She struggled toward the end. I tried to help, but he shrugged. Pride. She watched his face. Every word polished, every gesture rehearsed. I'll get to the point, he said. I know you just arrived. This is probably too soon, but I'd like to make an offer on the property. Fair price. More than fair. Actually, enough for a young woman to start fresh somewhere with real opportunities. I haven't decided what I'm doing yet. Of course not. Take your time. He pulled a business card from his pocket, set it on the rail next to the untouched casserole. But between us, this place needs serious work. The barn alone would cost a fortune to repair. And there are complications, legal things from years ago that never quite got resolved. He smiled. I can make all that disappear, one signature, and you walk away with cash in hand. Clean break. She picked up the card. Victor Hale, Hale Industrial, President. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. He stepped off the porch, then turned back. Oh, has anyone shown you inside the barn yet? Her fingers tightened around the card. Not yet. Probably best to leave it alone for now. Structural issues? Eleanor stopped using it years ago. He started toward his car, then paused, looked back at the barn. His eyes stayed there one beat too long. The warmth had left his face. What remained was something harder, hungrier. Welcome to town, he said. I'm sure we'll talk again soon. The SUV pulled away. Dust rose behind it and settled slowly across the yard. She stood on the porch until the sound of the engine faded completely. Then she went back inside, back to the workroom, back to the drawer full of letters. She spread them across the kitchen table. 15 years of correspondence. The tone shifted over time, professional to persistent, to something that read almost like threat. We urge you to reconsider. Our offer remains generous, given the circumstances. It would be unfortunate if legal action became necessary. The final letter from Hale Industrial, dated 3 years ago, Mrs. Marsh. I trust you understand. We have been more than patient. The technology developed during your husband's partnership with this company belongs, in part, to us. We have every right to pursue what is ours. Her grandmother's handwritten response, paperclip to the back. My husband developed this technology alone, before any partnership existed. You stole from him once. You will not steal from me. And you will never have access to that barn. She looked out the kitchen window. The barn sat in the fading light, doors still locked. Whatever her grandmother had protected for all those years was still inside. Victor Hale didn't want the farmhouse. He didn't want the land. He wanted what was behind those doors. And now she understood something else. Her grandmother hadn't just been stubborn. She'd been fighting for decades against the same man who had just stood on her porch, smiled at her granddaughter, and offered to make everything disappear. The question now was simple. What had Eleanor Marsh been protecting? And why had she left it all to a granddaughter she'd never been allowed to meet? She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she emptied every drawer, opened every cabinet, pulled every box from every closet she could find. By morning, the living room floor had disappeared beneath a sea of paper. Tax records, bank statements, legal correspondence going back 30 years. And buried inside a leather satchel behind the couch, the patents, 7 of them, each registered to Eleanor Marsh, dates ranging from 1985 to 2019. She spread them across the floor in order. The early ones dealt with irrigation systems, simple mechanical improvements, but the later patents were different. Complex diagrams, chemical formulas, technical language she couldn't fully understand. But certain phrases stood out: contaminated soil restoration, heavy metal extraction, groundwater purification. Her grandmother hadn't just been tinkering in that workroom. She'd been solving problems worth millions. A manila folder at the bottom of the satchel, inside court documents, Hale Industrial versus the estate of Richard Marsh. Richard, her grandfather, the man she'd never met. She skimmed the case summary. Victor Hale had claimed partial ownership of 3 patents, arguing they'd been developed during a business partnership. Eleanor had countersued, producing documentation that proved Richard created the technology independently before any partnership existed. Eleanor won 7 years ago, but paper clipped to the final judgment was a note in her grandmother's handwriting. He won't stop. He never stops. If I die before this is resolved, keep him away from the barn. Keep him away from her. Her. She read the line again, then a third time. Keep him away from her. The farmhouse walls felt closer, the air thicker. She gathered the patents and court documents, shoved them back into the satchel, and drove into town. Boyd's office smelled like old paper and coffee that had been sitting too long. He looked up when she walked in, then at the satchel in her hands. His expression shifted something between recognition and resignation. You found them. She dropped the satchel on his desk. You knew about all of this. I knew some of it. Tell me the rest. He removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes, gestured toward the chair across from him. She sat. Victor Hale and your grandfather were partners, Boyd said slowly. 40 years ago, started a company together, agricultural technology. Richard was the inventor. Victor handled the money. He paused. It worked. For a while. Then Richard developed something new. A system that could clean contaminated soil, turn poisoned farmland productive again. Victor saw dollar signs, wanted to sell it to the highest bidder. Richard refused. He wanted to license it affordably, help small farmers who couldn't pay industrial prices. Let me guess. Victor didn't agree. Victor tried to force him out. Filed papers claiming the technology belonged to the company. Not to Richard personally. They went to court. Boyd's voice dropped. Your grandfather had a heart attack 3 weeks before the verdict. Died at 52. The words hung between them. Eleanor took over the case, Boyd continued. Fought it for 2 years. Nearly lost everything she had. But she won. The patent stayed with her and Victor. Lost his stake in the company. His reputation, most of his money. Boyd shook his head. But he rebuilt. Different ventures, same industry. And he never forgot what your grandmother took from him. She didn't take anything. She kept what was hers. That's not how he sees it. Boyd leaned forward. Victor Hale has spent 30 years waiting for another chance. When Eleanor got sick, she wasn't sick. Boyd stopped. There's a diagnosis in these papers, she said. Dementia, 2 years before she wrote the will. But the letters she wrote after that date, they're sharp, detailed. She wasn't confused. Boyd's face changed. Something flickered behind his eyes, doubt, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. Let me see. She pulled the medical records from the satchel, handed them over. He studied them for a long moment, then looked at the signature at the bottom. Dr. Warren Cole. You know him. He worked for Hale Industrial. Boyd's voice was barely above a whisper. Company physician. 15 years ago. The room went silent. She wasn't sick, she repeated. Someone lied. Boyd set the papers down slowly. His hands weren't quite steady. If that's true, if Victor falsified a medical diagnosis to contest her competency, that's fraud. Criminal fraud. He met her eyes. But I can't prove it from this. Not yet. What would prove it? Documentation, communication between Hale and Cole, payment records, something that shows a connection beyond employment. He paused. Eleanor kept everything. Every letter, every receipt, every piece of evidence she thought she might need someday. The barn? Boyd nodded slowly. The patents are valuable, but the prototypes, the machines she actually built, those are worth more. Proof of concept. Working models. Everything Victor would need to claim he could have developed the technology himself. Can I get inside? That depends. He met her gaze. The key is in the second envelope, the one I gave you when you arrived. Eleanor's instructions were specific. Only open it when you've decided to stay. Why? Because once you open that barn, you can't unknow what's inside. And Victor will know you know. He leaned back. Right now, he thinks you're just a girl who inherited a run-down farm. Easy to pressure. Easy to buy off. The moment you open those doors, you become a threat. She thought about the SUV, the rehearsed smile, the way Victor's eyes had lingered on the barn. There's something else, Boyd said. The core patents expire in 3 months if they're not renewed. Victor knows that. He's been waiting for Eleanor to die so the clock would start running out. What happens if they expire? The technology becomes public domain. Anyone can use it. He paused, including Hale Industrial. So he just has to wait. Or he can make sure you don't renew them by buying you out, by contesting the will, by whatever means necessary. She sat with the weight of it pressing against her chest. I'm going to look into Cole, Boyd added quietly. See what I can find about his connection to Hale. But it'll take time, and if Victor catches wind of it, he'll move faster, she nodded. Then, the barn. What's really in there? Boyd looked at her for a long moment. Everything Eleanor spent her life protecting. He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the street below. And I think, though, she never said it directly, the answer to why she couldn't keep you. The afternoon light shifted across the floor. She picked up the satchel. Her grandmother's satchel now. The envelope, she said. The second one. You said to open it only when I've decided to stay. Boyd turned back to face her. That's what she wanted. She held his gaze. What if I've already decided? She woke before dawn with the envelope in her hand. She'd fallen asleep holding it. The second one, the one Boyd said to open only when she decided to stay. Her thumb traced the sealed edge. Inside the key to the barn, to everything. She sat up, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window watching the sky shift from black to gray to pale gold. 3 months? That's what Boyd had said. 3 months before the patents expired. 3 months before Victor Hale finally got what he'd been waiting 30 years to take. She set her coffee cup on the counter, picked up the envelope, slid her finger under the seal. The sound of tires on gravel stopped her cold. 2 vehicles this time, Victor's black SUV, and behind it, a silver sedan she didn't recognize. Both parked in front of the house like they owned the place. Victor stepped out first. No casserole today. No neighborly smile. He wore a charcoal suit, sharply pressed. His face held nothing at all. The man from the sedan was younger. 40, maybe. Leather briefcase. Polished shoes that didn't belong on a dirt road. He walked like someone who charged by the hour. She met them on the porch. The envelope still in her hand. Miss Marsh. Victor's voice was different now. Clipped. Professional. This is my attorney, Mr. Connors. We have documents that require your attention. I don't recall inviting either of you. This won't take long. Connors opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder, and extended it toward her. I'm here to formally notify you that Hale Industrial is contesting the last will and testament of Eleanor Marsh. She didn't take the folder. On what grounds? Undue influence. Mental incapacity. Connors flipped the folder open himself, held up a document. Your grandmother was diagnosed with early-stage dementia 2 years before drafting her current will. Under state law, any legal document executed during a period of documented cognitive decline can be challenged. Her throat tightened. That diagnosis is wrong. I have the medical records right here. He pulled another page. Dr. Warren Cole conducted the evaluation. His findings are clear. Progressive cognitive impairment affecting judgment and decision-making. Connors tilted his head slightly. Your grandmother was not of sound mind when she named you as beneficiary. The letters she wrote after that date, people with dementia often appear lucid in isolated moments. Victor's voice cut through, smooth and cold. It's a cruel disease. Eleanor had good days, but the diagnosis stands, and the court will decide what that means for this estate. Connors continued. We filed a motion with the probate court. A hearing has been scheduled for 6 weeks from now. Until the matter is resolved, a temporary injunction has been placed on the property. He paused. Let the words settle. You may continue to reside here, but you are prohibited from selling, transferring, or materially altering any assets. That includes any outbuildings or their contents. And she stared at him. You're saying I can't open the barn? Correct. Not until the court rules on the validity of the will. He closed the folder. If you violate the injunction, it will be entered into the record. Judges tend to look unfavorably on beneficiaries who disregard legal process. This is fraud. Victor's expression didn't change. This is the law. Miss Marsh, I suggest you respect it. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a second document, a single page, neatly typed. However, he said, there is another option. Sign this, and the entire matter goes away. No court date, no legal fees, no stress. He held it out to her. I'm prepared to offer you a settlement, enough to start over somewhere with actual opportunity. You walk away clean. I take responsibility for the property and its complications. She looked at the paper, didn't touch it. How much? Generous. More than this place is worth on the open market. His eyes flicked toward the barn. Especially given the structural issues. And if I don't sign, then we go to court. The process could take months, a year. Possibly, during that time, you won't be able to touch anything. The patents will expire. The property will deteriorate. He lowered the paper slightly. And at the end of it all, you may lose anyway. Judges don't like uncertainty. They like clean paperwork and medical records signed by licensed physicians. She said nothing. Victor stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive, something sharp. "Let me be direct with you," he said quietly. "Eleanor was a difficult woman. She held grudges, she made enemies, and she spent the last 20 years of her life alone on this farm, talking to no one, trusting no one." He paused. "Is that really the legacy you want to inherit?" Her hands were shaking. She pressed them against her sides to make them stop. "I'm not signing anything today." "Of course not. Take the weekend. Think it over." He set the settlement offer on the porch rail, weighted it with a small stone so the wind wouldn't carry it away. "But don't take too long. My patience has limits." He turned and walked back toward his car. Connors followed without a word. At the SUV door, Victor paused, looked back at her one more time. "Your grandmother made her choice," he said. "She chose pride over practicality, and she died alone because of it." His voice carried across the yard, flat and final. "You don't have to make the same mistake." The engine started. The cars pulled away. Dust rose and hung in the morning air. She stood on the porch until the sound faded completely. Then she walked inside, sat down at the kitchen table, spread the injunction papers in front of her, and read every word. Temporary restraining order, prohibition against material alteration, court date in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Bomb. The patents expired in 3 months. If Victor could drag this out, delay the hearing, file additional motions, bury her in legal procedure, the clock would run out before she ever set foot inside that barn. She looked at the envelope on the counter. Still sealed. Still waiting. The key was in there. She knew it now with certainty. Everything she needed was behind those barn doors, the prototypes, the documentation, whatever evidence her grandmother had spent a lifetime collecting. But touching it meant violating a court order. It meant giving Victor exactly what he needed to prove she was reckless, unfit, undeserving. She picked up her phone, dialed Boyd's number. He answered on the second ring. "I just had visitors," she said. "Victor and his lawyer. They filed an injunction. I can't open the barn." Silence on the other end. "Then how long?" 6 weeks until the hearing. "But you know he'll try to delay it." "Yes, he will." Boyd's voice was heavy. "I'm sorry. I should have seen this coming. What do I do now?" "For the moment, nothing. Don't touch the barn. Don't give them ammunition." He paused. "But I'm going to start digging into coal. The doctor who signed that diagnosis, if there's a connection to Hale beyond employment, I'll find it." She looked out the window. The barn sat in the morning light. Doors still locked. "And if you don't find anything," Boyd didn't answer right away, "then we fight with what we have," he said finally, "and hope it's enough." She hung up, set the phone on the table. The settlement offer sat on the porch rail where Victor had left it, waiting, patient. All she had to do was sign, take the money, walk away, start over somewhere else. the way she'd done a dozen times before. Her hand moved toward the envelope on the counter. Stopped. Not yet. Not like this. She left the settlement where it was and went to bed without eating. That night, she dreamed of a locked door she couldn't open and a voice on the other side calling her name. The pen hovered over the signature line. 2 a.m, kitchen light casting yellow shadows across the walls. The settlement document spread flat on the table. Edges weighted down with coffee mugs, gone cold. Victor's terms were simple. Sign over the property, accept a cash payment, walk away. The number was generous, more money than she'd ever seen in her life. Enough to disappear, start somewhere new, forget this place ever existed. Her hand trembled. The pen touched paper. Just sign it. Take the money. Stop pretending you belong here. She set the pen down, pushed back from the table, through the window. The barn sat in darkness. The injunction said she couldn't open it. The law said she had no right to whatever was inside. And maybe they were right. Maybe she had no right to any of this, the house, the land, the legacy of a woman she'd never known. Chun. The envelope sat on the counter where she'd left it that morning. Still sealed. Still waiting. She walked to it, picked it up, held it over the trash can, throw it away, sign the papers, be done with all of it. Her fingers wouldn't open. Instead, they slid under the seal, inside a brass key, tarnished with age. And beneath it, a photograph, small, wallet-sized. Edges, worn soft from years of handling. A woman holding a child. The woman was her grandmother younger, maybe 60. The child was perhaps 3 years old, dark hair, serious eyes, a face she recognized from mirrors. She turned it over, faded ink, her grandmother's handwriting, small, careful, pressed deep into the paper. The only day I was allowed to hold you, October 14th, 2005. They took you from me that afternoon. I tried to follow. They called the police. I stood in the parking lot and watched until your car was gone. I never stopped watching. I never stopped fighting. And I never stopped loving you. Her hands shook so badly, the photograph nearly slipped from her fingers. She read it again, a third time, a fourth. They took you from me. Not I gave you up. Not I didn't want you. They took you. The knock came just before 3. She opened the door to find Boyd on the porch, coat thrown over what looked like pajamas, hair uncombed. His face was gray with exhaustion, but his eyes were sharp, alert. I found something. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Been going through old files all night. Cases I handled for Eleanor years ago, and I found. He stopped, saw her face, the photograph in her hand. What is that? She gave it to him. He read the back, read it again, then sat down heavily in the nearest chair, like the weight of the words had buckled something inside him. She never told me? Told you what? About the custody case. His voice was hoarse. I knew she had a granddaughter, knew there was family trouble, but she never explained. He rubbed his face with both hands. I thought she'd chosen to keep her distance. Thought maybe it was easier for everyone. What custody case? Boyd looked up at her, old, tired, carrying something heavy. Your parents, when you were 2, they filed to cut Eleanor out of your life completely. Restraining order, supervised visitation denied. They claimed she was, he stopped himself, claimed she was what? Mentally unstable, unfit to be around children. He held up the photograph. Sound familiar? The medical records? The dementia diagnosis? The same pattern, 20 years apart. My parents did this. I don't know who orchestrated it, but I know the playbook. Boyd reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. This is what I found tonight. Employment records for Dr. Warren Cole, the physician who signed Eleanor's dementia diagnosis 3 years ago. He spread papers across the table. Contracts, pay stubs, internal memos. Cole worked for Hale Industrial from 2001 to 2008. Company physician, salary paid directly by Victor Hale's office. Boyd pointed to a bank statement. But look at this. Monthly deposits, $5,000, different account, every single month from 2008 until Eleanor died. She stared at the numbers, the dates, the trail. He was still paying Cole for 15 years after Cole officially left the company. Boyd's voice hardened. Those payments started right around the time Cole began his private practice. And I'd bet everything I own that one of his first private patients was your grandmother. The room felt different now. The walls closer. The air sharper. She was never sick. No. Boyd gathered the papers. She wasn't. But I still can't prove it. Not in a way that would hold up in court. Cole won't talk. He's protected by privilege and self-interest. And Victor's lawyers will bury any subpoena under motions for months. Then what do we do? Boyd looked at her, then at the barn key lying on the table beside the photograph. Eleanor knew this day would come. She spent decades preparing for it. Everything she kept, every document, every prototype, every piece of evidence. It wasn't just about protecting the technology. He paused. It was about proving that Victor Hale has been lying, stealing, and manipulating the system for 40 years. That's all in the barn. I believe so. Yes. She picked up the key, cold brass against her palm. The injunction says you can't remove or alter anything. Boyd leaned forward. But if you're documenting what's there, taking photographs, making an inventory, preserving evidence for a legal proceeding that's different, that's arguably your right as property owner. Arguably, yes. He didn't look away. Arguably. She looked at the photograph again. 3 years old, being carried away from the only person who'd actually wanted to keep her. She fought for 20 years, Boyd said quietly. Lost her husband, lost her granddaughter, lost almost everything. But she never signed anything over to Victor Hale. Never gave up. He stood slowly. She left you the one thing that could end this. Not because you're her blood, but because she believed you'd know what to do with it. The barn. The truth. He moved toward the door, then stopped. I'm not going to tell you what to do. That injunction is real. Victor's lawyers are real. There are risks I can't predict. But Boyd turned back, met her eyes. But your grandmother didn't spend 30 years protecting that barn just to watch it get handed over to the man who destroyed her family. The door closed behind him. His car started. Headlights swept across the yard, then disappeared down the road. She stood alone in the kitchen, the key in one hand, the photograph in the other, the settlement papers still on the table. She picked them up, looked at the signature line, still blank. Then she walked to the stove, turned on the burner, held the corner of the first page to the flame, and watched it catch. The fire ate through Victor's terms, his generous offer, his clean break. Ash fell into the sink. She picked up the barn key, walked to the back door, stepped out into the darkness. The barn waited at the edge of the yard, silent, patient, keeping its secrets for one more hour. She crossed the frost-covered grass. Her breath made clouds in the cold air. Her hands were steady now. The lock was old, heavy, rusted at the edges. She inserted the key. It fit. She turned it. The door swung open. Darkness, the smell of machine oil and sawdust and something else. Underneath old paper, maybe decades of stillness disturbed by cold air rushing in. She found a switch on the wall beside the doorframe, flipped it. Fluorescent tubes overhead flickered once, twice, then buzzed to life one by one. And then she saw, not a barn, not anymore. The space had been transformed. Workbenches lined every wall, surfaces covered with tools arranged in precise rows, lathes, drill presses, welding equipment, industrial machines she couldn't name, their surfaces still gleaming under thin coats of protective oil. In the center of the room stood 3 large structures draped in canvas tarps, each one roughly the size of a small car. She walked to the nearest, grabbed the canvas edge, and pulled. The tarp fell away. A machine, cylindrical body, complex network of pipes and filters, gauges and dials and control panels, a small engine mounted on one side, everything constructed with obvious precision, obvious care. She pulled the second tarp, another machine, different configuration, larger filtration system, more sophisticated controls. The third tarp revealed the newest version, sleek, compact, a prototype that looked almost ready for production. 30 years of work, 3 generations of the same invention, each one more refined than the last. Her grandmother hadn't just designed these on paper. She'd built them with her own hands. In this barn, everyone thought was falling apart. The walls told another story. Blueprints covered nearly every vertical surface, floor to ceiling, overlapping in places. Technical drawings, handwritten calculations in the margins, problems identified, solutions proposed, test results documented, a complete record of a lifetime spent solving something that mattered, and photographs. She stopped at a corkboard mounted near the back wall, dozens of pictures pinned in rows. Some were professional, her grandmother receiving awards, shaking hands with officials in suits, but most were different. A child at a birthday party, maybe 5 years old, candles on a cake, a girl in a school uniform, first day of middle school, a teenager at graduation, cap and gown, standing alone in a crowd. She recognized the face in every single one, her own. Each photograph had a small note pinned beneath it, her grandmother's handwriting, careful, precise, Age 5. Foster home number 2. Still smiling. Age 12. New school again? You look tired, but you're still standing. Age 17. Graduation day. I was in the parking lot. You didn't see me. I saw you. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of a workbench to keep from falling. All those years, all those moments, she'd believed no one was watching. No one cared. She'd been wrong about everything. A small desk sat in the corner of the barn, personal space, a coffee mug on a coaster, dried rings staining the bottom, reading glasses folded on a stack of papers, a cardigan draped over the back of the chair. Her grandmother had lived here, worked here, while the rest of the world saw a lonely old woman on a failing farm. Eleanor Marsh had been building something, protecting something, watching over someone she wasn't allowed to reach. She sat down in the chair. The leather creaked, still molded to a shape that wasn't hers. On the desk, a metal lockbox. No visible keyhole, just a small combination dial. She tried the numbers from her birthday. Nothing. Tried Eleanor's birthday from the documents she'd found. Nothing. Then she tried October 14th, 2005. The date on the photograph. The day they'd taken her away. Click. Inside the box folders, labeled, organized. Her grandmother's system, meticulous to the end. Patents, original documentation. Hale versus Marsh, complete record. Cole evidence. She pulled the Cole folder first. Letters, bank statements she'd already seen copies of. And at the bottom, 2 items she hadn't expected. A small tape recorder, old model, the kind that used microcassettes. A tape still inside. Labeled in her grandmother's handwriting, Cole Confession, September 2023. And beneath it, a sworn affidavit. I, Warren Cole, MD, hereby attest that the diagnosis of cognitive impairment issued to Eleanor Marsh on March 15, 2021 was false. This diagnosis was created at the request of Victor Hale in exchange for ongoing financial compensation. Mrs. Marsh was of sound mind at the time of my evaluation and remained so until her death. I make this statement freely, in full knowledge that my medical license and freedom may be forfeit as a result. I am dying. I have perhaps 2 months remaining. I do not wish to meet my Maker with this weight still on my conscience. Signed this day, September 3rd, 2023. 3 weeks before her grandmother died, Eleanor had known. She'd gotten the confession. She'd prepared everything. But she'd run out of time. She pressed play on the tape recorder. Static. Then a voicemail. Older. Tired. I did what Hale wanted. I've done what Hale wanted for 15 years. The woman was sharp. Sharper than me, probably. But he paid well. And I needed the money for my daughter's medical bills. That's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse. I'm not proud of any of it. A pause, rustling, then her grandmother's voice clear, strong. Nothing like someone suffering from dementia. And the original diagnosis, when my granddaughter was taken. Cole's voice again, quieter now. Same arrangement. Hale wanted you out of the picture. Your son-in-law owed him money gambling debts. I think Hale made those debts disappear in exchange for cooperation, cutting you off from the child. I signed the evaluation that said you were unstable. I've regretted it every day since. The recording ended. She sat in the silence that followed. Her grandmother's voice on the tape, alive, determined, fighting until the very end. And now she understood. All of it. Victor Hale hadn't just stolen technology. He'd stolen 20 years of her life. Paid off a doctor to separate a child from the only person who'd actually wanted her. And her grandmother had spent every one of those years building a case, collecting evidence, waiting for the chance to make it right. She stood, walked to the corkboard, found the photograph of herself at 17 graduation day, standing alone in cap and gown, turned it over. On the back, in her grandmother's handwriting, "You survived everything they did to you. You will survive this too. I believe in you. I always have." She unpinned the photograph, put it in her pocket, gathered the affidavit, the tape recorder, the folders, walked out of the barn into the gray light of early morning. Victor Hale thought he'd already won, thought she'd sign his papers and disappear like everyone expected. He was about to find out how wrong he was. Boyd's office, 9 in the morning, winter sunlight falling through dusty windows. She sat at the small conference table, her grandmother's leather satchel beside her. Inside 30 years of evidence. Everything Eleanor Marsh had spent her life collecting. Everything Victor Hale had spent his life trying to bury. Boyd stood by the window, watching the street below. "They're here." She heard car doors, footsteps on the stairs, the outer door opening. Victor Hale walked in first. Charcoal suit, silver tie, the confident smile already in place, though his eyes moved quickly, scanning the room, taking inventory. His lawyer followed. Then 2 other men she didn't recognize. Witnesses? Maybe? Or just muscle in expensive clothes. "Miss Marsh." Victor pulled out a chair and sat without waiting to be invited. "I have to admit, I was surprised to get your call. I thought our business was concluded." "Not quite." He glanced at the satchel. "If this is about renegotiating the settlement, I'm afraid that offer expired when you chose to ignore it." "I didn't ignore it. I burned it." Something flickered in his expression. Gone before she could name it, she reached into the satchel, pulled out the first folder. "I found some things I think you should see." She laid each document on the table, one at a time, slow, deliberate. The original patent applications, her grandfather's handwriting in the margins, dates from 1984, 2 years before any partnership with Hale Industrial existed. Victor's expression remained neutral, but his lawyer leaned forward, scanning the pages with visible concern. "These prove nothing," Victor said. "Richard and I were collaborating long before. The partnership agreement is dated 1986. She placed it on the table. "The patents are dated 1984. Your own signature confirms you had no involvement until 2 years after the core technology was developed." The lawyer whispered something. Victor waved him silent. "Old paperwork, easily challenged in court." She pulled out the next folder. Bank records, monthly payments from an account registered to Hale Industrial, recipient Warren Cole, MD. 15 years of payments, she said. Starting 3 months after, Dr. Cole signed a diagnosis claiming my grandmother suffered from dementia, stopping 2 weeks after her funeral. Victor's lawyer reached for the papers. Victor's hand came down on his wrist, stopping him. "Where did you get these?" "My grandmother kept records." She met his eyes without blinking. "Of everything." The room went quiet. The lawyer was sweating now, flipping through the documents Boyd had placed in front of him. His face lost color with each page he turned. These could be fabricated. This proves nothing without." Victor stood. His chair scraped against the floor. "This is harassment. You entered that barn in violation of a court order. Everything you found is inadmissible. The injunction prohibited removal or alteration of assets." She didn't stand, didn't raise her voice. "I removed nothing. I photographed what was there. I'm preserving evidence for a legal proceeding. That's my right. You have no rights. You're a contested beneficiary of a fraudulent will." Fraudulent. She reached into the satchel one final time. The tape recorder. She set it on the table. Press play. Cole's voice filled the room. "I did what Hale wanted. The woman was sharp. Sharper than me. Probably. But he paid well. And I needed the money." Victor's face changed, the polished surface cracking. Beneath it, something harder, uglier. "Hale wanted you out of the picture. Your son-in-law owed him money, gambling debts. Hale made those disappear in exchange for cooperation, cutting you off from the child. I signed the evaluation that said you were unstable." She stopped the tape, placed the affidavit on top of the pile. Cole's signature. Dated 3 weeks before her grandmother's death. Notarized and witnessed. "Dr. Cole is dead now," she said quietly. "But his confession is very much alive, along with documentation of every payment you made to him, every false diagnosis he signed, every year you stole from my grandmother and from me." Victor's lawyer stood up, closed his briefcase. "Mr. Hale, I need to advise you that any further statements in this room—" "Sit down, sir. I strongly recommend—" "I said sit down." The lawyer sat, but he wouldn't look at anyone. Victor walked to the window, stood where Boyd had been standing, looked out at the quiet street below. "Your grandmother—" His voice was different now, stripped of charm, stripped of performance. She never understood what she had. That technology could have cleaned up industrial sites across the country, could have made us both wealthy beyond measure. It was never about money for her. No. He turned. It was about pride, about holding something back just to prove she could. His jaw tightened. Richard was the same way. Stubborn, self-righteous, refused to see the bigger picture where you owned everything they built. The bigger picture where the technology actually got used. He stepped toward her. "Do you know how many contaminated farms are sitting empty right now? Poisoned land that could feed families again. Your grandmother sat on the solution for 30 years because she couldn't stand the thought of me benefiting from it. She didn't trust you. She was paranoid. She was right." Her voice didn't waver. "You paid a doctor to lie. You stole my grandfather's work. You took me away from the only person who actually wanted me. And you spent 40 years trying to finish what you started. You built nothing. My grandfather built the technology. My grandmother protected it. All you ever did was try to take what wasn't yours. They stood 3 feet apart. His breathing had changed faster, shallower, the polished mask crumbling. You think you've won something here? His voice dropped. You think any of this changes anything? I have resources, lawyers. I can tie this up in appeals for years. You could try. She picked up the satchel. But I've already sent copies of everything to the state attorney's office. The bank records, the affidavit, the recording. She zipped the satchel closed. Fraud, falsifying medical records, conspiracy to deprive a minor of her legal guardianship. Even if you fight me on the estate, you'll be fighting from inside a courtroom as a defendant. The room held its breath. Victor looked at her. Really looked. For the first time, perhaps, seeing something other than an obstacle to be removed. You're like her. The words came out flat, empty. Exactly like her. She said nothing. He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. For a long moment, he stood there, shoulders tight, the posture of a man who had spent his whole life taking and had finally run out of room. Then he left. His lawyer followed, the others after them. The door closed. Footsteps faded down the stairs. Car engines started, drove away. Boyd sat down heavily across from her. It's not over, he said. There'll be investigations, hearings. It could take months. I know. But the injunction will be lifted. The will should stand. And Victor, he shook his head slowly. Victor's going to have bigger problems than this estate. She nodded, looked at the documents still spread across the table. Her grandmother's life work, her grandmother's proof. Boyd, yes, thank you. She paused. For everything she couldn't say while she was alive. He nodded. His eyes were wet, but he didn't look away. She gathered the documents, put them back in the satchel, her grandmother's satchel now. Then she walked out of the office, down the stairs, into the cold morning light, the town she didn't know, the life she was only beginning to understand. Her grandmother had fought for 30 years. Now, finally, she could rest. 3 weeks passed. She stayed. The farmhouse needed work. Small things, mostly. A screen door that wouldn't latch properly. A kitchen faucet that dripped through the night. Loose boards on the porch that groaned when she stepped on them wrong. She fixed them one by one. Drove to the hardware store in town. Asked questions she wasn't embarrassed to ask. Made mistakes. Made more. Eventually figured things out. The woman at the hardware store stopped calling her the Marsh Girl and started using her actual name. The man at the diner remembered her coffee order without being reminded. The postal worker waved when she drove past. Small things, but they added up to something. Boyd stopped by on Saturday mornings now. Not for legal business, just coffee on the porch, watching the road, talking about nothing in particular. He'd known Eleanor for 20 years. He had stories. She had questions. The hours passed easily between them. Victor's lawyers filed another motion last week. He mentioned one morning, steam rising from his cup. Judge denied it. Again, she nodded. The legal process would take months, maybe longer. But the outcome wasn't in doubt anymore. Cole's confession had been entered into evidence. The bank records were on file, The state attorney's office had opened a formal investigation. Victor Hale would spend whatever time he had left answering for what he'd done. His company was under investigation. Some people said he'd already left town. She didn't ask for details. It didn't matter anymore. Patent renewal went through, Boyd added. You've got another 20 years on the core technology. I've been reading about it. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. The soil remediation systems, what they could actually do if someone put them to use. Eleanor had plans, licensing agreements drafted, partnerships with agricultural nonprofits outlined. He looked at her. She wanted the technology to help people, not to make anyone rich. I know. What are you going to do with it? She watched a pickup truck pass on the road below. Dust rose behind it, caught the morning light, settled slowly back to earth. Finish what she started. The barn stayed open now. She worked there most afternoons. Not building, yet she didn't have her grandmother's skills, not even close. But she studied the blueprints, the prototypes, the decades of notes and calculations covering every surface. A professor from the State Agricultural College had driven out the week before, spent 3 hours examining the machines, asking questions, taking careful notes. When he finally left, his hands were shaking. This is remarkable work, he'd said, standing in the doorway. This could rehabilitate thousands of acres. Old mining sites, industrial dumps, land that's been poisoned for generations. That was the idea. Why didn't she ever? He stopped himself, looked around the barn, the workshop, the photographs, the evidence of a lifetime spent working alone. Never mind. I think I understand. He'd given her his card before leaving. An invitation to present the technology at an upcoming conference. A chance to bring her grandmother's work into the light where it belonged. She hadn't decided yet, but she hadn't said no. Late afternoon, the light changed softer, warmer, turning everything the color of honey. She walked through the house. Her house now. Her grandmother's things were still in place, but rearranged, made room for a few of her own belongings mixed in, not many, but enough. The kitchen smelled like bread. She tried baking last week, failed completely. Tried again 2 days later, failed less. This morning's attempt sat cooling on the counter lopsided, slightly darker on one side, but edible. Her grandmother had baked bread. She'd found recipes in a notebook tucked into a kitchen drawer, handwritten, stained with years of use. She wasn't following them exactly, but she was learning. The chair by the window. She sat down slowly. The leather had started to soften differently, now molding to a new shape. The old blanket lay across her lap, faded blue wool, still soft after all these years. Outside, the road stretched toward town. Oak trees lined the edges, branches bare now, waiting for spring. A few last leaves clung to the highest limbs, refusing to let go. Her grandmother had sat here for years, watching that road, waiting for someone who never came. No, not never. She had come. Finally, too late to know her grandmother face to face, but not too late for everything else. The photograph still sat on the windowsill. The one from the barn herself at 17. Graduation day. She'd had it framed, put it where she could see it every morning. On the back, visible through the glass, if she tilted it right, You survived everything they did to you. You will survive this too. I believe in you. She had, she was still surviving, but it didn't feel like survival anymore. It felt like something else, something quieter, something that didn't require fighting every single day just to stay standing. Night fell slowly. She didn't move from the chair. Watched the sky shift pink to purple to deep blue. Stars appearing one by one, the way they always had, the way they always would. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to frighten her. Empty rooms, no one to call, no one expecting her anywhere. But it felt different now. Not empty, still, not lonely, peaceful. She reached over and turned on the lamp beside the chair. Warm yellow light spilled across the floor, through the window, out into the yard beyond. Anyone driving past someone heading home late, someone just passing through, would see that light, would know the house had someone in it again. After all those years of darkness, someone was finally home. She thought about the girl she used to be, 7 years old, standing in a government office, hearing words she didn't understand. 14, packing everything she owned into a garbage bag, moving to another stranger's house. 21, eating cold noodles over a sink in a rented room, wondering if that was all there would ever be. That girl would not have believed this moment was possible. Would not have imagined sitting in a farmhouse at the end of a dirt road, owning something, belonging somewhere, being wanted by someone who had never stopped trying to reach her. But that girl was still here, inside, watching through the same eyes. You made it, she thought. We made it. The blanket was warm across her lap. The lamp cast familiar shadows on the wall. Outside, wind moved through the bare branches, a soft sound, steady, constant. She closed her eyes. For the first time in 21 years, she wasn't waiting for anything, wasn't hoping to be rescued, wasn't bracing for the next loss. She was just here, home, and that, finally, was enough.